This is our sort of second in a row industrial themed thumbnail. How are you tonight, John?
I am really well. Very impressive work coming out of the genie in a bottle.
Well, right. I did utilize artificial intelligence to create this, but I'm using a hybrid method because Photoshop has introduced some artificial intelligence tools that allow me to introduce a great deal of manual manipulation, sort of the thing that's missing from some of these other artificial intelligence tools. And so I've created a lot of disparate elements. This is basically the fabricated bullshizer industry, formerly known as the FBI.
A lot of people have been wondering what exactly are they fabricating at that J. Edgar Hoover building? What kind of factory is that exactly?
Right.
And you may be onto something. It appears that there's some steer around the backside.
Exactly.
So yeah, we're going to explore that because we had this opportunity to hear from Mr. Durham this week, and you were there in person, which makes it even more exciting because we get to hear what he says, and as he's speaking, you are on camera right behind him making faces. And so we're in this show tonight, we're going to get to look at some of the back and forth between Durham and the various Congress people in the United States, and we're going to get to watch what was Jason doing and what was Jason's reactions as these things were happening, because it's actually very funny. It's very interesting. And some of the interactions were heated.
Outrageous.
Again, you were in you were in the room, so you must have been just, kind of shocked with some of it. Some of it was somewhat confrontational. And I guess what we're going to really explore is at the end of it was over 5 hours, right? It was 5.5 hours or something like that. And at the end of it, it seems like, I don't know, seemed like half of the people in the room came away with like a completely different, story.
View of Durham, you mean?
Yeah.
Or what do you mean, different story?
Of what happened. In other words, because after Durham did his thing, I guess there was this other thing that took place. I guess it was the same day where there was this censure.
Right, of Adam Schiff.
Adam Schiff.
Love it.
And the censure of Adam Schiff was, I think, somewhat based on what Durham had said earlier. And yet when Schiff was censured.
I think Maria Bartiromo is confusing you. She says important very carefully, but she's not saying censured.
No, that's okay. I forgive her easily.
I like her, yeah.
So yeah, I'm a big fan. So this happens, and as that happens, it seems like all of the Democrats weren't listening to what was happening in the Durham thing because, I don't know, again, this doesn't seem, other than the subject matter itself, the fact that they were, going after the president, other than that, what I heard from Durham just didn't seem that partisan to me, except for the fact that it was a political topic. But he was pretty factual. It's like, they didn't do this, they didn't do that, they're supposed to do this, we have these procedures, we have those procedures.
Let me pause you a second.
Yeah.
People's minds are going to be blown tonight when they join us for the sponsor-exclusive segment on subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen, patreon.com/IamJohnCullen, odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth, crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com, and subscribestar.com and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, because what was said in the text of the transcript or, whatever the text of that hearing was not what was going on there. It was in the subtext of what was going on that is where the answers lie. And I feel, John, that after 6 years of being directly involved in this and my exposure to lawfare, everybody knows about the lawsuits I've been going through and that I've been talking about Benjamin Witte's and the Lawfare Institute. I have a very strong feeling that I know perhaps more about this situation with regard to getting to the meat of who needs to be held responsible, I think, than any other person in the world who wasn't directly involved. And I say that because of the insights that I have had that have developed and matured over the years that I've been looking into them with regard to the death of Peter Smith and the attempt by this cabal of truly evil lawfare practitioners that includes the FBI and Adam Schiff, their effort to try to entrap Charles Ortel. And we're going to talk about all of that on the sponsor exclusive segment.
Okay. Well, first, I think what we're going to do is focus on what did Durham actually say.
Yes.
And so let's cue up the video. Let's take a look. This show's going to be a little different. We're going to go right to Congress. We're going to listen to what Durham had to say.
Mm-hmm.
But first, let's listen to Jim Jordan open it up. And what was his initial statement before we cut to Mr. Durham?
Oh, I had it queued up for Durham. Let's just back up a little bit here.
Right after the Pledge of Allegiance.
Summarize your testimony in 5 minutes, but we'll give you a little extra time if you need it. Mr. Durham, you may begin. Hit your mic there, Mr. Durham, and just keep it on if you can throughout the day.
Is it on?
Yep, it's on now. Thank you.
Begin. Good morning, Chairman Jordan, Ranking Member Nadler, and members of this committee. As the committee knows, on May 13th, 2019, Attorney General Barr directed me to conduct a preliminary review into certain matters related to federal investigations concerning the 2016 presidential election campaigns. That review subsequently developed into several criminal investigations and gave rise to my subsequent appointment as special counsel in these matters. Many of the most significant issues documented in the report that we have written, including those relating to lack of investigative discipline, failure to take logistical, logical, investigative steps, and bias, are relevant to important national security interests that this committee and the American people are concerned about. If repeated and left unaddressed, these issues could result in significant national security risks and further erode the public's faith and confidence in our justice system. As we said in the report, our findings are sobering. I can tell you having...
Sorry.
So first, let's do a quick roll call as to who's in the room. So there's Jason Goodman, right to the left of Special Counsel Durham, looking very sharp.
Thank you.
I don't know who is. It looks like the guy sitting immediately in front of you is Zion Williamson, the ball player from the Memphis Pelicans, who's involved in all that sexual stuff. Yeah, is that him?
Oh,
no, I guess
wait,
not.
the black guy or the white guy?
Yeah, no, the black guy, Zion Williamson.
I don't know who that is.
Oh, he's a basketball player, got in a lot of trouble for dating prostitutes or something. I don't know.
Oh,
I guess he wouldn't be there. Who's the guy with the red tie and his arms folded?
So this is like part of Durham's team. This is the guy who basically, or maybe it was this guy. I think I spoke to both of these guys sort of, but before the hearing began, so there's this row here says reserved for witnesses, and there's like a little bit of space in between that row and where Durham is, and you can sort of walk out from the seats and walk in there and go sort of right to the desk where Durham is sitting. And I've done that before. I spoke to Chuck Grassley doing that, spoke to Ron Johnson doing that. And basically when you go there, all the people who surround these dudes are ready to like knock you out, and they're looking at the senator or whoever it is. And if he says, I can't talk to you, they shuffle you out right away. But in the case of Chuck Grassley, he looked at the Twitter report and he handed it right to the guy who was ready to kick me out and said, read this, study it, and tell me what I need to know about it. So then the guy asked me for my phone number, and suddenly they become your friends. They didn't call me back. But anyway, back to these guys. These were, I believe, members of his, investigative team. They were pretty obviously lawyers, in my opinion, or at least they seemed to be. And one of them was the guy. So first thing I said to Durham was, I handed him the Twitter report, and he took it and looked at it. It's got a big colorful picture on the front. And then I said, Mr. Durham, is Brookings Fellow 1 in your report Benjamin Wittes? And he smiled, he chuckled, and he said, I'm not going to talk about the report. Then I went and sat down. They did the whole first half of the thing. Then at the break, I went back over there to try to talk to him, like, you got to be quick because he's walking out of the room. And so I think it was this guy on the left. He was sort of big and tough. The older guy, I think, was the guy I spoke to the first time. But the big tough guy sort of set a pick so that I couldn't physically get to Durham. And then he said, we have no comment. And I said, I'm not asking for a comment. I'm trying to tell him something. And he said, you're not talking to him. So obviously what I wanted to talk about, they didn't want to hear. You can yell at these guys about Joseph Mifsud all afternoon, and they're sort of nonplussed. So that tells me that Joseph Mifsud is not important. And smiling and chuckling when I ask him about Ben Wittes and having him redacted from the report, not being questioned here at all, I think he's extremely important.
Oh, well, we know he is because of the letter to Comey. But again, we'll get back to that. But the fact that he smiled when you confronted him on it, I mean, that's a tell right there. Let's let it play. Let it roll.
Spent 40 years plus as a federal prosecutor. They were particularly sobering to me. A number of my colleagues who spent decades in the FBI themselves, they were sobering. While I'm encouraged by some of the reforms that have been implemented by the FBI, the problems identified in this report, anybody who actually reads the report, and the details of the report, the documented portions of the report, I think would find that the problems identified in the report are not susceptible to overnight fixes. As we said in the report, they cannot be addressed solely by enhancing training or additional policy requirements. Rather, what is required is accountability, both in terms of the standards to which our law enforcement personnel hold themselves and in the consequences they face for violation of laws and policies of relevance. I'm here to answer your questions. I appreciate the opportunity to. I'll answer them to the best of my ability, and I hope to be of service to your oversight function. As I'm sure you know, the Department of Justice has issued some guidelines as to what I'm authorized to discuss and those things that I am not authorized to discuss. In this regard, accordingly, I'll refer principally to the report. I do want to emphasize a few points at the outset, however. First, I want to emphasize in the strongest terms possible that my colleagues and I carried out our work in good faith, with integrity and in the spirit of following the facts wherever they lead without fear or favor. At no time and in no sense did we act with a purpose to further partisan or political ends. To the
Who's doing the
extent that
photo
somebody
bombing next
suggests
to you?
otherwise,
Sticking
that's simply
their
untrue.
face
I
in
don't
there.
know. That's just some lady. But this C-SPAN woman was getting a little bit pissed off at me because there's a couple times I took like panoramic photos and had my arm up in the air and she was like whacking me on the head.
The camera lady behind you with the big camera and the headset?
C-SPAN operator. Yeah.
Yeah, she looks like she's not very tolerant of...
I think that's an easy job. You just stand there and make sure the camera doesn't turn off. Quickly, though, before we continue with the videos, I want to make sure if people are tuning in and just hearing about this email for the first time, this, once again, I agree with you, is an extremely important piece of evidence. This was authenticated and placed into evidence by the Senate Homeland Security and Government Accountability Committee, chaired by Ron Johnson. This is a Bates stamp on the email, and so that means this is authenticated evidence authenticated by the Senate. So if you wanted to, for instance, present this in a civil lawsuit, this is something that a court will take judicial notice of because you can't easily refute it. This is evidence. And this is
It's not hearsay. This is not hearsay.
Well, it is, but it is an exception to the hearsay rules because it's authenticated by the Senate. So he's saying, hey there, this is Ben Wittes writing to Reinhold Niebuhr, which James Comey has revealed is his personal email address, and that's corroborated by the fact that Niebuhr sends it to Comey on his FBI email, and then Comey sends it to Andrew McCabe, and now all the communications are happening on an FBI email server, and my allegation is that this message was sent by the highly sophisticated from a litigation standpoint and lawfare standpoint. This was sent on purpose by Benjamin Wittes. I would say that these two individuals expected this email to come into evidence, but they did not expect me to learn certain things about someone that this email is about And that's the fly in their ointment. He says, "Hi there, I'm writing because a very strange document has crossed my desk that may or may not have implications for investigations you guys are conducting. Under normal circumstances, I would simply assume that the document is either a fraud or that you guys already know about it." Anyway, he goes on to tell him that Shane Harris is investigating this thing. It's come from a private British intelligence company. And all this language about him having no idea if it's authentic, this is just something that he found on the internet, and he's being a diligent citizen sharing it with the FBI. He's in no way implicated in maybe scheming to create false evidence through this British intelligence cutout, laundering it through Shane Harris at the Wall Street Journal. Wittes has no idea about any of that because he doesn't even know if this thing is authentic or accurate. To which I say, John, this email is brought to you by the hardworking factory workers at the fabricated bullshit industry factory, where steers go in one end, I fire up the furnaces, and the FBI stacks up shit right outside. And we're going to talk about that.
Well, what's interesting here is that if you were to do a quick search for all of the think tanks, the leading think tanks in the world, Brookings, where Benjamin Wittes supposedly works, is number one as far as the revenue, dollars, what have you.
Wow.
So Brookings is at the top of the list of the think tanks. Think tank organization list. I think we looked at it top think tanks worldwide. We looked at it a week or two ago. You see that? You already clicked on the link down there.
Yeah.
One of those links you've already clicked on. Yeah.
Here we
So
go.
we've looked at this before, and Brookings is like at the top of the list. So so sort of the insinuation here is that Brookings is really a front from one of the U.S. agencies.
No, wait, where is Brookings here?
Those are endowments. That's different. So there's
Rand
Rand.
Corporation
There's
is
Rand.
there.
Yeah. But the insinuation here is that the Brookings Institute, has people like Ben Wittes and Bruce Rydell. And it says, Bruce Rydell used to work for the agency that's based in Langley, Virginia. And so the insinuation is that, once you work in Langley, you always work for Langley. You never get to be a former Langley person.
Whoa, look at this. They've got one in India. They got one in Qatar. I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're all over the place. So if Brookings is contacting the FBI, it's almost like, making a phone call from one zip code in Virginia to another zip code in Virginia. Yeah.
But wait, here's the important thing. Because it's not an official Brookings communication. It's just a friend emailing a friend. I mean, this is what I'm talking about with cutouts, and we don't know what email address Benjamin Wittes was using here. I would presume he's going to use his personal email address because this is not any kind of official communication. He's saying, "Hey there," and he ends it with, "Oh, hope you're doing well. It was great seeing you a couple of weeks ago, buddy."
Yeah, I love that Comey is using like a Carlos Danger email handle. It's
exactly.
like, wow, Reinhold Niebuhr. What?
Well, he's a German, like, socialist philosopher.
Freaking weird. Comey is a strange dude, man.
And he's misspelled it.
Isn't he
too,
like 6'8" or something? He's like 6'8", 6'9".
He's very tall.
He's a strange bird. Yeah, he's a strange bird.
Yeah, just so that we have a little background.
So obviously, he's
Niebuhr.
not really communicating with Reinhold Niebuhr, right? Because he died in 1971.
He died in 1971, but he was an American
right.
Reformed theologian and ethicist. Kind of ironic that James Comey would use that. I'm pretty sure this guy was a communist, but we don't need to look into him all that much.
And Ben Wittes would know that this guy died in 71 since he's so smart and he works at Brookings. Right. He's a smart guy, works at Brookings. Right. All right. Let's get back to our hearing with Mr. Durham, and let's jump to our next cue point in this, which is Mr. Johnson from Louisiana. I think kind of brings this thing to a beautiful thing at 2732. 2732, Mr. Johnson.
Yes, and I really do like Mike Johnson. He was quite attentive, polite, respectful, and interested in the Twitter coup report. I spoke to him for several minutes at the previous hearing that I was at. And he's a lawyer, and this is one instance where I appreciate the lawyers who are there, because we need some people who know what's going on from a legal standpoint. And there's this range of skills and capabilities in Congress, ranging from somebody who seems as dumb as somebody's grandmother to these very sophisticated lawyers. Let's see what Mike Johnson.
I agree. That's why I handpicked these. That's why I
Yes.
selected these rather than us just, spinning the wheel and see what we get. Because some of these are just a disaster.
Here's Johnson.
And we'll make fun of them. We've got a couple we're going to make fun of.
The 5-minute rule for questions. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Durham, for being here today. This is much anticipated. We have lots of questions for you. I'll try to set the table here at the outset from 20,000 feet. The American people rely on the FBI to abide by its guiding principles, and you know what those are: fidelity, bravery, and integrity. And we rely upon them to uphold the Constitution and protect the American people. Americans deserve and expect from our premier law enforcement agency to apply justice blindly, and that is without political bias or ulterior motives. However, your report now famously states, and here's the big quote, based on the review of Crossfire Hurricane and related intelligence activities, you concluded that the DOJ and FBI failed to uphold their important mission of strict fidelity to the law. There's no other way to put this. The report illustrates egregious actions on behalf of the FBI that have further eroded faith in our institutions. Mr. Durham, in your report, and again here today, you said that your findings and conclusions are sobering. Could you unpack a little bit more what that means? Why do you say sobering?
Well, let me give you some real-life views on that. I have had any number of FBI agents who I've worked with over the years. Some have retired, some are still in place, who have come to me and apologized for the manner in which that investigation was undertaken. I take that seriously. These are good, hardworking, the majority of people in the FBI, decent human beings who swear under their oaths to abide by the law and the like. And I think that exemplifies of the concern here. There are investigative activities undertaken or not undertaken here which raise real concerns about whether or not the law was followed, the policies in place, the FBI were followed.
You wrote in your report, quote, based on the evidence gathered in the multiple exhaustive and costly federal investigations of these matters, including the instant investigation, neither U.S. law enforcement nor the intelligence community appears to have possessed any actual evidence of collusion in their holdings at the commencement of the Crossfire investigation. To date, has any evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia ever been uncovered?
I mean, there is information, obviously, in the report that was prepared by Director Mueller and whatnot. But as to collusion or conspiracy, I'm not aware of any. And
let me stop you. When the FBI opened Crossfire Hurricane, that's the issue at hand, it did not have any information that anyone in the Trump campaign had ever been in contact with Russian intelligence officials. Isn't that right?
As we wrote in the report, we talked to the director of the CIA, the deputy director of the CIA, the director of NSA, and people within the FBI, and there was no such information that they had in their holdings at the time they opened Crossfire Hurricane.
And you detail, I'm going to go quickly here, I run out of time. You detail how FBI personnel working on FISA applications violated protocols. They were cavalier at best, as you said in your own words, towards accuracy and completeness. Senior FBI personnel displayed a serious lack of analytical rigor towards information that they received, especially information received from politically affiliated persons or entities. And you said, quote, a significant reliance on investigative leads provided or funded by Trump's political opponents were relied upon here. Among the most alarming things that you referred to in the report is the impact of confirmation bias. And you said in your report at page 303, that's defined as, or it stands for, the general proposition that there is a common human tendency, mostly unintentional, for people to accept information and evidence that is consistent with what they believe to be true. But sir, here, this wasn't innocent, unintentional human tendency, was it? It was overt political bias, was it not? Peter Strzok, for example.
There are some individuals who clearly expressed a personal bias. It's difficult to get into somebody else's head to see whether they knew it.
Unless we have their emails, right? Peter Strzok, for example, he had pronounced hostile feelings towards President Trump. Everybody knows that. Everybody in the country knows it. So he was in charge of this. He was the Deputy Assistant Director of Counterintelligence, officially opened the investigation at the direction of Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe. He said horrible things about President Trump and all of his supporters, by the way. How could we say he did not have political bias?
Yeah, I know that it clearly reflects a personal bias that he had. I'll leave it to others and the facts that are set out in the reports, whether that's political bias, personal bias, but there's clearly bias.
What we know now is the FBI and the DOJ have been turned into activated political weapons against citizens and even a former president because of their opposing viewpoints, sir. They failed to follow protocols in 2016, and you've suggested new protocols may somehow be affixed to this. How can the American people have confidence that if they didn't follow protocols in 2016, that they will new protocols?
And I think that's why I said that in the opening remarks, this is not an easy fix. I mean, it's going to take time to rebuild the public's confidence in the institution. The changes of the forms they have made are certainly changes that are going to guard to some extent against the repeat of what happened in Crossfire Hurricane.
I'm out of time. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from New York. Mr. Durham, can you pull that mic?
So we're going to have to break now and go over to the sponsor exclusive segment where we're going to continue this. I've got a lot to say about some of the things that they were just asking there, but people are going to be able to join us on subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen, patreon.com/IamJohnCullen, Odyssey, Substack, all of the sponsor channels for Crowdsource the Truth. And I want to thank everybody who sponsors this show very much. I would have been out of this years ago if it weren't for the viewer sponsors who are sponsoring the show. I wouldn't have been at that hearing. I wouldn't have been able to ask Durham that question, and I wouldn't have been able to figure out everything that's going on with the Lawfare Institute. We're not done with this, so please join us. We'll be back.